Once your file is created, you should customize the chart of accounts. While the sample is good, it's very unlikely that it will be exactly what you need. You're probably going to have some accounts that you don't need that it includes, and some that you do want that it doesn't have. So you can add or remove accounts before going further in Peachtree so the transactions can be accurately categorized from the get-go. Let's go ahead and take a look at the chart of accounts that was created by going back up to Lists and choosing Chart of Accounts. This is very similar to the one that we saw when we were looking at the sample file, except this one, of course, is customized for a beauty shop. Now, we are actually running a spa, so our things are going to be a little bit different. What we can see, though, is that each of these does have an account ID. Unlike some other accounting programs, Peachtree does require account IDs. How you work with your IDs is up to you, to a point. It actually has a lot of flexibility. In addition to the accounting ID, you have a description. Description should be something that is, well, descriptive, and you also have a type, and that, of course, needs to conform to general accounting principles. You may have 0 balances on the right-hand side for all of these accounts at the moment, but that will change by either adding beginning balances or as you start to create transactions. We're going to go ahead and create a brand new account, but before we do so, I'd like to discuss account numbers. Peachtree is actually very liberal with the way it requires account numbers to be created. Now, I'm going to tell you just some good rules that I found to be best practices, as well as what some of the rules are that Peachtree has. First of all, account numbers can be alphanumeric, and they can include symbols, except the asterisk, the plus sign, and the question mark. You cannot use those 3. I recommend that you keep them alphanumeric, and actually I prefer numeric, but you can do alphanumeric and symbols. They can contain spaces, except they can't have spaces at the beginning or at the end. Now, my rule for that would be don't put any spaces in, but as far as Peachtree is concerned, you can use spaces except at the beginning and end. Remember that these account numbers are always going to be sorted alphabetically, so instead of using numbers, you might need to use leading zeros because they're going to be sorted alphabetically, not numerically. I have a little sample here for you. By default, if you had 1, 10, 2, 273, and 3 as account numbers, that's exactly the order they would be sorted in. Because alphabetical sorting goes by the first digit first, so 1 and 10, then this first digit would be 2 and 273. You get the idea. Leading zeros prevents that problem. If I use leading zeros, then I get the sorting that I want. 001, 002, 003, 010, and 273. Oddly enough, for a Windows-based program, account numbers are case-sensitive in Peachtree. So in theory, you could have exactly the same account number in alphanumerics with upper and lower case. They could look like they're the same, but if they're mixed case, you can actually have duplicates. Be careful with that. My recommendation would be that if you're going to be using alpha characters, that you actually keep them all lowercase or all uppercase to be consistent. Usually all uppercase is more the standard. Above all else, just make your account numbers logical and be consistent. Find a scheme that works for you. For example, if you wanted everything in training to be in 40,000, that would be great. Maybe 40,100 was computer training, 40,200 was HR training, 40,300 maybe is compliance training. They all fall under the 40,000, and there's your consistency, and then you're using the hundreds and maybe even smaller digits in order to specify specific types of training in this case. Another thing that you might want to do is have the same type of account, for example, the same type of computer training, which would be 40,100, but you also want to track training for different locations or training for different departments. That's when you need to use something called masking. Masking simply controls sub-accounts that track what displays on reports. So all you need to do is divide your account numbers into segments. If computer training is 40,100, then all of my computer training will be 40,100. But maybe the California branch is 40,100-01, and the Oregon department is 02, and the New York is 03. So you're going to use the main account number in the first segment. That's kind of the common denominator. And then you can have locations or departments in the second segment. And you can even have more than 2 segments. Maybe the second segment is for department and the third segment is for location. You see how you can get very detailed here. If you're working with masking, you always want to set a -00 level for Peachtree to display the sum of all segments. Then in your reports, you can say, I don't care about location or department, just show me all of my computer training. You're never going to enter transactions into the -00 account. In order to use masking, you have to make a little change in your file. It's not really that difficult. You just go to Maintain, Default Information, General Ledger, Account Segments. Right there you can type a description, and then you can set the length of each segment. In other words, what is the number of digits? For us, we were talking about having just 2 digits for our location or department. You can also choose a separator. So you're going to have a -00 or a /00, an _00. You'll just then repeat those steps for each segment that you want. When you're finished, you click OK, and then you're ready to go and create your good account numbers. So now that we know a little bit more about account numbers, let's go ahead and create that new account. Now before I get in there, I just want to have you remember a couple of things. Remember, assets are things you own, but you don't sell. Liabilities are debts you owe to others. Equity represents the amount the owners have provided, and income and expenses are pretty self-explanatory. So those are the things we're going to have to be working with when we create an account. These can be broken down into further detail, which we'll see there's a lot of different kind of detailed versions of that, but those are the general categories. Also remember that accrual-based companies must have an accounts receivable and an accounts payable. That's kind of the definition of accrual. Cash-based companies may or may not have them. Sometimes they do so that they can show the aging for accounts that are unpaid, but they don't have to have them. Accrual companies, on the other hand, do. So don't try to remove those if you're accrual-based, and just be aware of those categories we were talking about. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at creating a new account in the chart of accounts. That's easy enough by simply going to the upper left corner of this window and clicking on New. The Maintain Chart of Accounts window is there, and we're going to now create a new account, which is very exciting. We can create a new ID, or we can just type in a description. Let's see what happens if I type in a description. What this is going to be is what actually shows up on the chart of accounts. So I'm going to do sales-aesthetic services, because we had manicures and hair care, but we didn't have things like makeup and facials. I'll go ahead and press Tab once that's typed in. And that brings me down to the account type. We'll use the drop down here. And here's where we start to see those accounts that we're becoming very familiar with. Accounts payable, accounts receivable, and don't forget you can scroll down. This happens to be an income account. If I had a beginning balance, I could click the Account Beginning Balances button. But actually, I choose not to do that because I certainly could do it here, but I prefer to do it in the General Ledger. The General Ledger just seems to be a little bit better place, a little bit easier to work with. So I usually choose to do those types of entries in the GL instead. Now let's get back up to that account ID. What do I want to do with the account ID? Well, this actually is going to be our account number, the one we've been talking about. So originally, I had some services already in place, and they already had some account numbers. The account numbers were actually 40,000, 100, and 200. I'm just going to continue that numbering scheme and make this 40,300. Now this is not the same as segmenting my numbers. This is still just one number. So when I see them in a list, they are all going to be displayed, and they're going to be listed in alphabetical order, which will be 40,100, 40,200, 40,300. Segmenting is a little bit different, so don't get that confused with what we just did, which is just continuing a pattern, if you will, for the numbering. I'll go ahead and press Tab, and that gets rid of our drop down, and really that's all we have to do. Create an account ID, put in a description, choose an account type, and you notice the account ID and the account type are the two with asterisks. That means that they are required. If I wanted to go back and forth and see different accounts, I can use the Previous and Next button. And if I ever have one of these accounts that becomes inactive, maybe a service that I no longer provide, there is an inactive checkbox. The inactive checkbox will remove it from my list, but of course we can't delete it once it has transactions related to it. You'll also notice down at the bottom that we have some general ledger types of things. This again can be used, but we're not ready to do that yet. Now we're just creating the account. So all I need to do is come up to the top, click Save, and then I'll close. This brings us back to our chart of accounts. So I can create as many new accounts as I want following my account numbering scheme. I also can double click an account to pull it up and make modifications, which I can do at any time. And if there are accounts that I don't need and I haven't used, then I can go ahead and delete those. For example, when I look at our cash accounts, we have checking accounts and other kinds of accounts, a savings account, and then they have this one called special. Well, I'm never going to use a special bank account. So I'm going to double click to open this. And then in its toolbar, I'm going to click the delete button. It asks me if I'm sure I want to delete it, and I'll say yes. If that account had any transactions related to it, I would not be able to delete it. I could only make it inactive. So as you can see, working with the chart of accounts is not difficult really. You just need to know a little bit about what these account types are. You need to know what types of accounts you need, how to go in and create consistent numbering and good naming, and then you can always modify or make them inactive if you need to later on. With that, I'll go ahead and close out the Maintain Chart of Accounts window, and I'll also close out the account list. We've been able to create a company file as well as modify the chart of accounts to work exactly the way that we need to for our particular business and the way that we do business.